Reading not only increases your knowledge but also reduces stress, improves focus and concentration, and expands your vocabulary. Plus, it's a great way to relax and unwind. I get many people sending me messages. How do you get the time to read all the books you read? Where do you get that time from? I want to read, I want to read more books, but I struggle. It's either I don't know what to do, I can't find the time, I'm so busy, or I just don't know how to go about it. So today I'm going to share with you how you can read one book every week. Yes, one book a week. One book a week. That would be about 4 books every month and over 50 books in a year. So how can you do that? I'm going to share my own tips with you, things I have tried over the years since I've been reading, and let's get into it. The first is to set a time for it. Yeah, I know you will be like, yeah, but I don't have the time. You can't do anything if you don't dedicate specific time that you want to spend to read. You can't say you want to read books and not have a time you want to read. Because if you just leave it to the fact that when I get the time I will read, then you will never get the time. You will never be able to make the time for it. So if you want to read, set specific times of the day that you want to read. Most books take about 10 hours to read, or less or more, depending on the book, but I feel like an average book is around 7 or 6 hours dedicated time reading. And if you say you want to dedicate that amount of hours to reading, you probably will not get it, so you need to cut it. So if I want to read a book that is about 5 hours to complete and I want to be done in a week, then reading about 45 minutes a day can get me to accomplish my goal. But where do I get the 45 minutes from? I need to intentionally set time out for it to read, for me to read that book at that time. For me, the last thing I do is to read before I go to bed. And so if by 9 p.m. I decided, okay, let me just pick this book and go. Sometimes I read for 3 hours before I go to bed. Most times, just like 30 minutes or 45 minutes and just read whatever I want to read. And depending on the book. So if it's non-fiction, it takes me a lot of time. Like sometimes when I'm reading, I need to sit down to process whatever I'm reading. But if it's fiction and I'm just reading it for the fun and entertainment, it's easier to go and I can read even 4 hours into it. So you need to set specific time. If you think morning is the best time you will get to read, then use your mornings and set 45 minutes out of that to read. If you are like me and you want to read in the night, then that will also be the best thing. Other people can also read, if you use bus to work, right? You can read mostly from your way to work and out of work, instead of sitting in the bus and scrolling through social media or listening to music. I'm not saying those things are bad. I'm just saying that because you say you don't have time to read, you can intentionally use those times. So anytime you sit in a bus, you just pick a book, and if it takes you 30 minutes from your home, sitting in the bus to where your office is, then you can spend about 30 or 25 minutes reading. And when you are coming back again, about 30 or 25 minutes reading. That's almost an hour of you reading without even specifically dedicating the time for it. And so yes, dedicate time to read. And I feel like that's even the only point. If you decide to just follow these points, you should be able to read one book every week. But I have more tips for you. The next point is to use audiobooks. I particularly don't like audiobooks that much, but sometimes I know a lot of people who enjoy audiobooks than the hard copy books. And so if you want to read a book a day, then using an audiobook is one of the ways you can do that. So if you get up and you are preparing for work in the morning, you can just play it out loud. And whilst you are going about doing it, you'll be listening to whatever the audio reader is reading to you. Or if you are driving to car, instead of playing music and jumping around, you can also listen to audiobooks. If you are taking a walk, I listen to a lot of podcasts in the morning when I wake up and I'm preparing for work or for school. It's always my phone is always playing something. So it's either I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm listening to an audiobook, or I'm listening to music. And when I'm walking, I walk to school. When I'm walking, if I'm not walking with somebody and I'm walking alone, I'm also still listening to something. And like at all times, I'm listening to something is playing from my phone. It's either a podcast or a book. So if you want to read a book every week, you should spend those in between times. You don't need to dedicate the time to say, I'm going to sit down to listen. But as you are going about your normal daily things, you can decide that, let me just plug into this audiobook and go to Audible and start listening to audiobooks. The third is knowing when to speed read and when to focus read. I don't even know how I came up with these things, but there are certain books that when you are reading it, you need more focus, right? Or even within the book, there are certain parts that the author is trying to like make you understand a point and you need to focus. And when you get to understand it, like the rest of the things they are talking about is just trying to explain it. And so if I understand it, I just speed read the rest of the part. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I just speed read, right? There are certain books I read for educational purposes. So whatever I want to learn from the book, if I'm able to get it, then I just speed read like the rest of the book just to see what the author talks about. But I've already gotten the whole point of like whatever the author wanted to tell me. And so if you know when to speed read and when to focus read, you can spend less amount of time reading a book than it requires for you to read. And so you'll be able to read a book a week if you don't need like 20 hours to spend reading from word to word. The next one is you don't have to complete the book. I don't know why. I personally struggle that when I start reading a book, I want to finish it so that I can say I completed this book. But I've learned that they are publishing books every day. Thousands of books, millions of books are out there. If I want to spend time reading every book I encounter, I mean, it's not possible. And so when you start reading a book and you feel like this author is not going anywhere with it, there's no point wasting your time reading it. Like, move on to read other important books. I must say that like sometimes certain books, it takes time for you to get into the book to understand whatever the author wanted to say. So at least be a little patient and go after a few chapters. But there are just certain books that is bad from the beginning, and so if you start reading and you see that this book is bad, like there's no point deciding that you want to complete the book. Leave it and go get other books to read. This is an advice to myself, but I'm also putting it out there. And next one is to break the book down into chunks. Most books are even divided by like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, or in chapters, or you can even divide it by the number of pages. If a book is 300 pages and you want to read it in a book, I mean, if a book is 300 pages and you want to read it in a week, that's about 40 pages or 42 or 43 pages that you have to read per day to be able to achieve your goal. So if you just divide the book, you know that, okay, today my goal is to read 40 pages. 40 pages is, I mean, it's nothing. So you can easily just read 40 pages and go about. So break the book down into chunks and sometimes find a reading partner. I have a few people that like we share books and we read, so we make the discussion in chunks. So we are reading this chapter today and we would discuss it and go back and read. So if you find a reading partner that you can divide the book and read in chunks and have discussions with the person, it can also help you complete. But you need to at least find somebody who is at your pace, because sometimes if somebody is too slow, you see that all of you will slow down. If somebody is too fast, they are pushing you to get up there. Just find somebody who you feel like, okay, all of us can motivate ourselves to be able to read one book every week. The last point I'm going to discuss with you is to track your progress. I have been reading for a long time, but I used not to keep a list of the books I read. And I'm like, oh, some of them I can't even remember their titles anymore. But these days when I read, I update on my Goodreads, but I also have a list on my Notion app that I keep a track of the books I have read. And a few times I just go back and look through the list. I'm like, oh my god, you've read so many books, and it keeps me motivated and I want to read more books. You get, so keep track your progress, especially if you are a beginner and you set out that you want to read a book every week, and at the end of the month you have read 4 books. You feel proud of yourself and you want to continue to read more books. And so these are the tips I have been using to help me read at least a book a week. There are some weeks I read more books a week, and there are some weeks I read I'm not able to complete a book. There are some books that are like 1,500 pages. Oh my god. Anyway, so what do you think about it? Leave a tip. If you are a reader as well, leave a tip on how you are able to read more books at a time. And I'll see you next one. Please don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share with a friend that you think they should start reading. Reading is so good. It helps your mind. It helps you to relax. It helps you to focus. And you get to learn so many new things that authors have poured hours and hours of dedicated time into it. So I'll see you in my next video. Stay safe and bye.